Welcome back to Monday, folks. This is going to be a very exciting question period. There has been a tremendous amount of pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine protests happening all across Canada, and the government is under immense amount of pressure to respond, especially since how the government chose to respond with the Freedom Convoy back in 2022. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I hope that you are subscribed, but if you're not, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button on the stream if you haven't yet. And if you want a I Love Oil and Gas sticker or I Did Not See That Coming, the link for that is down in the description. And let's get into this.
In 1992, he was elected to Parliament.
They're starting off with statements by members, and they'll be segueing into question period within several minutes.
During the House of Commons Christmas toy drive, Stan used to dress up as Santa, and apparently one night during an evening vote, he came in full Santa regalia in order to vote on the behalf of the people of Thunder Bay Atikokan. That was the quintessential Stan, a guy who always had a glitter in his eye, always had a sense of duty for his country, and always put others before himself. Stan will be missed by very many people, but none more than his loving wife, Peggy, who is his soulmate, his 3 daughters, and 5 grandchildren. Stan Spichevi Zimero, Slava Ukraini, Stan.
The honour member for Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This past Friday was World Egg Day, a day to mark the importance of eggs as the critical protein that they are, while also celebrating the positive impact of our egg farming sector here in Canada. For over 50 years, our local egg farmers have supported their rural communities and ensured that Canadians have consistent, year-round access to fresh, local, affordable, and high-quality eggs from coast to coast. Egg farmers and farm families serve as a strong, stabilizing economic force within our communities and contribute $1.3 billion to Canada's GDP annually. This year, World Egg Day was an opportunity to recognize the role of egg farmers in building strong and vibrant rural communities across Canada, supporting small businesses and investing in their local economies. I ask all members to join me in wishing
World Egg Day, like the only affordable protein left for now.
Egg Day.
The honour member for St. John's East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Newfoundland and Labrador has a long history of strong women leaders, and Her Honour Judy Foote clearly sits within this group. After over 20 years in public life, both in the House of Assembly and here as a Member of Parliament, she became the 14th Lieutenant Governor of Newfoundland and Labrador. She was the first woman to hold this post and served in an inclusive, open, and caring way. Referencing Government House as the People's House, she opened the grounds with yoga on the lawn, horticultural therapy, and accessible walking trails.
Just a reminder, everyone, before question period actually starts, to hit that like button. Let's try and get over 100 likes.
A powerful feature. She is a cancer survivor, humanitarian, and friend. Your Honour, Judy. Thank you for your service to the province and the country. Your care for the common good has transformed how we view the role of Lieutenant Governor, and we thank you and look forward to your next role in public service. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
To take the floor this afternoon, to recognize, believe it or not, 4
someone give her a breathalyzer.
All of whom were parliamentarians, all of whom passed away between when we adjourned in June and resumed in September. The Honourable Stephen Owen, the Honourable Pat Carney, Hugh Segal, and the Honourable Monique Bégin. Mr. Speaker, I particularly want to pay tribute to Pat Carney, who has not had a round of speeches in this place, to recognize her role as an MP, her role as a cabinet member, as a senator, as a trailblazer for women's rights, and as a dear friend. She was also my constituent, and her closest home place was always Saturna Island. She contributed to this country in many ways, including being the first MP to put forward a bill to eliminate discrimination based on sexual orientation. She fought for women's rights and opposed legislation that restrict abortion rights. She was an extraordinary woman, a good friend, a great leader, and a Canadian who contributed to this country in so many ways. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, after a long battle with illness, producer Guy Latraverse, the nicknamed the Father of Quebec showbiz, passed away on Saturday. The unforgettable Saint-Jean on the Mountain in 1975, the mythical show Une fois cinq, the Diane Dufresne in a packed Olympic stadium, we owe them all to Guy Latraverse. We must also salute his courage in publicly addressing mental health issues, a man who had to deal with bipolar disorder all his life. In this area, as in so many others, he was a trailblazer. An assertive independentist, his first passion, as his sister Louise eloquently pointed out, was Quebec. Propelling our artists a little higher and a little further was his way of making Quebec shine. His contribution to our national pride is unparalleled. Our thoughts are with his family and friends. Mr. Latraverse, thank you for everything. Quebec owes you a great deal.
Le député de Whitby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is World Food Day, a day where we are reminded that we must work together to confront the issue of food insecurity here in Canada and around the world. With the rising cost of living, 24.6% of Ontario kids live in a food insecure household, a sharp increase from last year. Whether breakfast or lunch, healthy school meals play a vital role in alleviating household food insecurity and providing the essential nourishment for children's growth and development. Last Wednesday, the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development and I held a productive meeting with almost 30 MPs from 4 political parties. We heard an insightful presentation from the Coalition for Healthy School Food and Breakfast Clubs of Canada, outlining the importance of a national school food strategy as we ensure every child in this country receives the food that they need to reach their full potential. Thank you to all the participants for your continuing support and advocacy.
L'honorable député de West Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honored to rise today to recognize and commend an outstanding individual in our riding of West Nova, Wayne Bell.
Certainly not the previous speaker.
Manager at Belleville Motors in Church Point. For several months, Wayne has been raising funds to support a good friend, Dean Jones, who's battling cancer and has organized 43 of the Terry Fox runs in Weymouth, Nova Scotia. The most a Weymouth Terry Fox run has ever raised about $3,300. And when Wayne heard that his friend Dean was putting together another fundraiser in this year's run, he wanted to help. Wayne got creative and started an online campaign where he put out a challenge to the entire community that if he raised over $10,000, he would jump off the wharf at Bellybo's Cove in a Speedo. Surprisingly enough, Wayne was able to raise just over $11,000 for this year's Weymouth Terry Fox run, and the rest, of course, is history. Mr. Speaker, no one should have ever to endure cancer alone, and especially to fight against it alone. It's a perfect example of our community coming together to support an important cause to help one another. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Who's Terry Fox? I don't even know. Didn't they take down his monuments? Remove him from the passport? I have no idea who Terry Fox is anymore. Nor will my kids. He's history.
160th anniversary. In the 1800s, tens of thousands of Chinese arrived in Canada to work on railroads, forestry, and gold mines. They played a crucial role in Canada's nation building. Separated from their families, they worked under harsh conditions. In 1885, they built Gi Hing, now a Canadian National Historic Site. Chinese Freemasons of Canada provided immigrants a support system and allowed them to pay homage to their ancestors.
Fairy talks.
Also mediated disputes. I wish to recognize and thank the long services of Ottawa residents, 92-year-old Mr. Bing Chan, 91-year-old Mrs. Yim Hang Fong, Grandmaster Lap Chun Sunny Law from Toronto, and Grandmaster Fred Ying Wah Kook from Vancouver, and current National Chair Albert Tang. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, October is Latin American Heritage Month, a time to celebrate the vibrant cultures, traditions, and contributions of the Hispanic and Latin American communities in Canada. Over 1 million Hispanic and Latin Americans coming from more than 20 countries now call Canada their home. They come from many different countries, but they are one community. At the beginning of the month, I had the chance to walk in the downtown Toronto Latin Parade and Fall Fiesta, and you could see the rhythm, the colors, the alegria, as well as the diversity of the community out in full force. So this month, I invite everyone to celebrate the music, literature, food, and culture of Hispanic and Latin American Canadians, and let's also take a moment to appreciate their extraordinary contributions to our country. We are a better and stronger country because of it. Viva los Latinos y los Hispanos en Canada. Viva!
All right. L'honorable député de York Simcoe.
Mr. Speaker, small businesses are the cornerstone of our communities. They're the supporters of local sports teams, small town fairs, and charities. They are the job creators. They provide valuable goods and services to the community every single day. Unfortunately, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, it is now harder than ever for hardworking small business owners to stay open. Tax hikes, red tape, crime, quadrupled carbon taxes, inflation is causing significant hardships. I don't know who's left buying what this government is selling. Most small businesses are barely holding on by their fingernails. They are seeing fewer customers as the cost of living rises. Right. Canadians need more common sense, not nonsense, from a Prime Minister who's just not worth the cost.
Hear, hear.
This Small Business Week know that Conservatives will take care of business by taking care of small businesses. We will bring back hope and get government off their backs.
L'honorable député de Mont-Royal.
Alexandra Look, Ben Mizrahi.
This guy always looks surprised. His eyebrows are always up.
Epstein, Judith Haggai. 6 Canadians brutally murdered in the war launched by the terrorist group Hamas against our friend and ally Israel. Over 1,400.
There you go, another liberal.
The sickening brutality.
Calling Hamas terrorists.
Slaughtered. Elderly survivors of the Holocaust butchered. Innocent civilians, Israelis, Americans, Canadians had their lives ended or forever changed simply because they were Jews. And I feel for hostages being held in Gaza whose fate is unknown, and innocent Palestinian civilians who suffer because of Hamas. Yet there are pro-Hamas demonstrations in our own country celebrating this depravity. I hope the entire House joins me in denouncing those who are celebrating the death of innocent Israelis, those who are inciting violence against Jewish Canadians.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, my heart is broken. I am devastated. I stand with our ally Israel. I stand with the people of Israel. Am Yisrael Chai.
The Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Mr. Speaker,
this is going to get really interesting.
Grocery prices down before Thanksgiving. Well, the turkey has come and gone, and grocery prices are not down. Another broken promise from a Prime Minister who is not worth the cost. Maybe he was talking about American Thanksgiving. Well, I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, putting together a committee of Liberals to recommend how to bring down prices is a wasted effort. They have no plan. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians are out of money, and this government is out of ideas. Our Conservative leader will axe the tax and the second carbon tax and the tax on the tax and the tariffs on Canadian farmers and cut the regulations that are adding costs to the food chain. Conservatives know how to talk turkey, Mr. Speaker, and Canadians need the hope that we are bringing.
Yep.
The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, Hamas launched a number of terrorist attacks against Israel last week, taking hostage numerous people. They have raped women, decapitated babies, and tried to kill as many Jews as possible. Israel has been told to stop defending itself by Iran, and they've said war could spread. Iran wants Israel to just accept the murder of its own people, that they do nothing and say nothing. Israel has a right to defend itself against these attacks. Conservatives condemn unequivocally the invasion of Israel by Hamas terrorists. I find it odious that anybody in Canada or elsewhere would support Hamas knowing that at least 5 Canadians have been killed, including Alexandre Luc of Montreal. There is no place in Canada for the glorification of terrorism. No money from Canadian taxpayers should support terrorism. We need to bring back common sense. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, last week I had the opportunity.
Oh, thanks for the super chat, Kirk. I appreciate that.
An organization.
Family and I are doing great.
Work to meet.
Daughter just started learning how to walk.
Most vulnerable people.
It's a very precious moment.
Center fills a major gap in our society, one that certainly needs more attention.
Let's try and get 300 likes, everyone. We've got almost 1,000 people in here. Everyone just hit that like button. Question period is moments away from starting.
Environment for adults with physical disabilities so that they have access and may participate to a variety of educational, social, cultural, and recreational programming in a community setting. This includes field trips, cooking classes, social activities, and wellness activities. For only $25 per year, adults between the ages of 21 and 65 years old living with a physical impairment can become members of the Action Centre and take full advantage of all that it has to offer. I want to thank all of the Board of Directors and the staff at the Action Centre for the incredible work that they do and the difference they make in the lives of their members. Thank you.
L'honorable député de Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Today is World Food Day, and we must turn our attention to the food insecurity and hunger that is plaguing our country. We have nothing to celebrate here in Canada. Food bank use is at its highest level in Canadian history, with more working families relying on them just to get by, and every week Canadians are making difficult choices when they visit the grocery store. The food crisis in Canada didn't happen overnight. We got here because it is the natural conclusion of decades of corporate-friendly, neoliberal economic policies that both the Liberals and Conservatives have championed. Because, Mr. Speaker, when corporate greed gouges the farmer who grows the food, gouges the trucker who ships the food, and then gouges everyone who is trying to buy the food, we get the out-of-control food price inflation that is hurting Canadian families. On this World Food Day, the entire NDP caucus and I renew our pledges to fight corporate greed so that Canadians are no longer struggling to feed themselves.
Hear, hear. Guys, you don't feel like you have to do super chats. I'm here, I'm reading the comments. Trudeau is scheduled to be there today.
Just a little reminder to members.
But I appreciate it, Captain Kirk.
Please.
Thank you. Justin Trudeau is scheduled to be in the House today.
Quiet, because I have a hard time hearing members who are far from me.
Thanks, Jordan Nelson, for the $10.
For Belle Chambly.
I appreciate the nice comments.
If you pay close attention, you'll hear the footsteps of a giant walking towards the stars.
Let's get the chat motivated, eh? How about we drop some L's in the chat for NDP and Liberals? Because they are going to get served today. It's going to be brutal. We have Hamas terrorist sympathizing protests all across the country.
In a career spanning from 1960
we have a government that has only used words to denounce. They haven't taken any actions in comparison to what they did to the Freedom Convoy. This is going to be a bloodbath.
And headed Francis.
Pierre Poilievre is going to go all out. Jewish MP Melissa Lantsman is going to be going all out.
With must-reads such as Patience.
There you go, folks. Get the L train going.
Above all, he passed on his wonder of space to so many Quebecers, including yours truly. It was Hubert Reeves who, when I was very young, sparked my passion for science magazines, which I accumulate to read or understand, and for astrophysics. On behalf of the Bloc Québécois, I offer my deepest condolences to his family and friends and to all of Quebec. All of Quebec mourns the
L for the Crime Minister,
who has gone back to talk to the stars. The honourable member.
The chicken came before World Egg Day.
Against Israeli civilians have been unimaginably
There you go.
horrific,
Jewish MP up.
and the sadistic crimes continue. In the carnage, 5 Canadians murdered, and they are not just numbers. Alexandre Luc from Montreal, Ben Mizrahi of Vancouver, both murdered when Hamas opened fire on a music festival. Sheer Gregory was also killed there. Adi Vital Kaploun of Ottawa was murdered in her kibbutz, and Neda Epstein murdered as he sheltered his girlfriend from a grenade launched at them. They are now in our memory forever, and may their memory be a blessing. Canadian citizens missing are believed to be held hostage amongst the 199 others by Hamas terrorists who hold their own people under siege in the gruesome grip, serving as a proxy for the regime in Iran, imposing maximum terror on everyone in their path of destruction. Amongst the missing, believed to be held Vivian Silver, Judith Weinstein, and Tiferet Lapidot, daughter of our own citizens. Their fate unknown. Canada could do more, and they must do more. Demand their release again and again, and we pray for their fate and their safe return.
I wonder if Melissa's going to make a comment about Trudeau calling Conservatives and truckers Nazis and terrorists.
The honourable member for Winnipeg South.
I got goosebumps, folks. My heart rate's going up. Oh, I'm so nervous for this.
Sad and filled with unimaginable grief as we are left trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. These terror attacks are the cruelest against the Jewish people.
I appreciate the super chats, everyone. I really do. It's a free stream.
It's possible to live in a
It's a free stream. You don't feel like you have to do any of that. Just comment, subscribe. Everyone, if you hit that like button, we get over 500 likes. But don't feel like you got to donate or do supers.
Children.
Buy a sticker by all means.
And we must be able to say this without the word but.
But thank you for the support, everyone.
Catalyst for some moral justification. There is no morality to be found in what they have done.
There's probably more Hamas terrorists than there are Canadian Armed Forces members.
Mean nothing.
That's scary.
Pursuit of hatred and the eradication of the Jewish people.
And there might be more Hamas supporters in Canada than we have our own military.
The value of all human life and extend to one another a sense of kindness and dignity as we struggle together.
That's scary to think about.
Ahead. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shit, that's really scary. That is terrifying.
Questions orales.
Oral questions.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
There you go, Pierre.
Monsieur le Président, après...
Mr. Speaker, after the attacks by Hamas nearly 2 weeks ago, there are Canadians who are still in danger. 4,000 Canadians are looking for help from the federal government to get out of Israel. About 300 Canadians are trying to leave Gaza. And between 40,000 and 70,000 Canadians are in Lebanon. What is the government doing to protect Canadians that are in danger? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, since this is the first time we are all in this House since the horrible terrorist attacks by Hamas.
Trudeau's hiding like a little wuss.
Canada is with the state of Israel and the Israeli people. Canada is at the side of Israel and the people of Israel, and they can count on the continued support of Canada.
Dude, her grandfather is a Nazi.
Liberation of all hostages and unequivocally condemn the terrorist attacks done by Hamas.
Her grandfather's a Nazi. This doesn't make any sense.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Innocent lives, be they Palestinian or Israeli, Jewish, Muslim or Christian or otherwise, are all equally precious. Countless of those lives have been lost or put in danger as a direct result of the sadistic attacks of Hamas. And that was the purpose of those attacks, to exact maximum damage on both Israelis and Palestinians and thwart any attempt for peace. We know that the regime in Iran was behind these attacks. And we know that the most powerful organizer of terrorism in the world is the IRGC, which operates legally in Canada today. Will the government accept the Conservative common sense bill to criminalize the IRGC in Canada today?
Wow. More than ever. More than ever. Now's the time.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is the first time we are all present in this House since these
Let's see what you got, Gaslighter.
terrorist attacks by Hamas on the State of Israel and the Israeli people. So I would like to begin by being very clear in English this time.
Let me be very
Canada
clear.
stands with the State of Israel and with the Israeli people. Israel can count on Canada's support. Canada condemns unequivocally Hamas's terrorist attacks, and we call for the immediate release of all hostages.
Speaking softly isn't going to solve it.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Last fall, the finance minister promised a balanced budget within 6 years. Last spring, she broke that promise and said that we'd have a balanced budget. Never. And last week, the parliamentary budget officer revealed that her deficit is now 15% bigger than she said it was only 6 months ago. Has the government lost total control of our debt? And how much is this inflationary spending going to add to the interest rates Canadians pay on their mega mortgages?
Yeah, millions of mortgages coming up for renewal.
Our government will be providing an update on our debt and deficit figures and on our revenues in the fall economic statement in due course. When it comes to Canada's fiscal position, let me also be very, very clear. Canadians should listen to the independent ratings agencies whose job it is to evaluate Canada's position and not the partisan talking Canada down attacks of the opposition. Canada's AAA rating has been reaffirmed by ratings agencies since the budget. We are strong fiscally.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Apparently, former Liberal Finance Minister John Manley is just a partisan using talking points when he says that this government's inflationary deficits are like pressing on the inflationary gas pedal and forcing the Bank of Canada to press on the brakes with higher interest rates. Canadian families have the highest debt load of any country in the G7, and those debts are colliding with the rates that this government is driving up. Will the finance minister cancel her inflationary deficits, balance the budget to bring down interest rates and inflation, or will she admit that she's just not worth the cost?
Let me be very clear.
Mr. Speaker, let me again bring some independent, non-partisan facts.
So predictable. AAA credit rating?
It is the job of the ratings agencies to determine the fiscal sustainability of every country's fiscal position. And ratings agencies have reaffirmed Canada's AAA rating.
I knew it!
Mr. Speaker, because we have the lowest deficit in the G7. And because, Mr. Speaker, we have the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. We believe in fiscal responsibility, Mr. Speaker, and the numbers show it.
She said it!
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Nonpartisan voice that I'm interested in.
So predictable.
A shipyard worker in Vancouver who told me that his mortgage payment has now risen to $7,500 a month. $7,500 a month for a shipyard worker and a middle-class family. That proves that this Prime Minister, after 8 years, is not worth the cost of mortgage payments. According to John Manley, Liberal Finance Minister, their deficits are driving up interest rates on the back of mortgage holders. Will she reverse these deficits so that we can bring down inflation and interest rates before this shipyard worker and millions of Canadians lose their homes?
The Deputy Prime Minister.
Speaker, talk is cheap, but actions speak louder.
Oh, that is funny from her.
Conservatives actually believed in supporting Canadians during the housing crisis. They would be supporting Bill C-56. Right. This includes a critical measure lifting the GST on all new rental construction that will get more homes built faster. The Conservatives should actually act in the interests of Canadians and not continuing to parrot their talking points, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I also wish to congratulate you. The United States created a group of 5 powers, including Germany, Italy, the United Kingdom, and France, to speak with a stronger voice in the face of the crisis that the entire world is facing, which is centered on Gaza. Canada, disappointingly, was not invited to participate in spite of the importance of the Jewish community here in Canada. Did the government ask to be part of this group? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Canada.
Oh, she's so annoying.
Important member of NATO, the G7, and last week I went to Morocco and the Ministers of Finance for the G7. This was the first in-person group of G7 ministers confirmed our support for the State of Israel, the people of Israel, and together we condemned the terrorist attacks led by Hamas. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Unfortunately, the United States State Department didn't see things that way because it simply did not invite Canada. And it's deplorable because it prevents the government from doing its work well for its own communities, its own citizens. This morning, I talked about the relevance and the opportunity for everyone here to talk along similar lines in order to defend the interests of the Canadian Jewish community and peaceful Muslims. If they could convene leaders to privately discuss the issues. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much appreciate the reality that all members of this House are facing members of the Liberal Party, members of the Conservative Party, members of the Bloc, and members of the NDP. We are all ready to show that for us, condemning Hamas's terrorist attacks and supporting Israel is not a partisan issue. It's a Canadian issue. That's the reality, and it's very important.
That's an interesting take.
Edmonton, Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, we are all shocked by the brutality, the kidnappings, and the targeting of civilians, including the elderly and children, by Hamas militants. And now the region is spiraling. Thousands of innocent Palestinians and Israelis have been killed in a conflict that they are not responsible for. Today we learned a 5th Canadian was murdered, and we know more Canadians are amongst the captives. What is this government doing to ensure the hostages are protected and returned to safety?
Well, you can't do anything about the hostages because they're hostages.
The Honourable Deputy.
But the ground forces are supposed to be moving in today.
Mr. Speaker, and I am glad to also hear the honourable colleague from the NDP be clear in her condemnation of these terrorist attacks. It is very important to show that this is not a partisan issue for Canada. Clearly, I share and our government shares her concern for the hostages, and we call for their immediate release.
Oh, Hamas didn't think of that.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Profoundly alarmed by what we are witnessing in Gaza. The UN has said that nearly half of Gaza's people have been forced to flee from their homes and that morgues are overflowing. This is a humanitarian crisis of extreme proportions. It took almost a week for the minister to start paying attention to the impact this war has had on Palestinians, even though thousands of people have been killed. Israelis and Palestinians have the right to live in peace. Why won't this government stand up for international law and call for a ceasefire?
Hear, hear. There is a ceasefire, you dummy.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
There was a ceasefire yesterday.
Our government is very clear that we support the State of Israel, and we recognize Israel's right to defend itself within international law. As the Prime Minister has said, we are deeply concerned by the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. International law must be respected, and Canada will continue to support civilians of Gaza facing urgent humanitarian needs. That's why we announced an initial commitment of $10 million in humanitarian assistance to trusted partners. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Years of failed Liberal NDP policies, this finance minister experiences inflation much different than everyday Canadians. Her enormous inflationary deficits led to 40-year highs in inflation that caused the Bank of Interest rates to go up more than ever in history, and they're just not worth the cost. After promising to balance the budget, her own budgeting watchdog called her out, proving Liberal deficits could reach almost $50 billion this year. I guess budgets don't balance themselves after all. Can the finance minister tell Canadians how much she's adding to the federal debt this year, or are we asking for too much?
That's too much to ask. She's going to reiterate AAA credit rating and fiscal responsibilities.
Ministre des Finances.
Mr. Speaker, our government will provide an update on the fiscal picture, both expenses and revenues, in the fall economic update.
1 out of 2 so far?
In due course. But let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, because I do not want Canadians to be misled by alarmist, partisan talking points from the opposition. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is that Canada's position is fiscally responsible. We have the lowest debt and deficit in the G7, and our AAA rating has been reaffirmed by our rating.
Ding, 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 ding. Bingo.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
The finance minister is known for speeding up just for the wrong reasons. By adding more debt than every government before them combined, she put the pedal to the metal on her deficits and revved up inflation. And unlike an Alberta highway, the consequences of her spending isn't just a speeding ticket. Higher inflation that led to higher interest rates, putting Canada most at risk in the G7 for a mortgage default crisis. After 8 years, they're definitely not worth the cost. Is the finance minister going to blow through her budget deficit projections again by more than $6 billion? Yes or no?
Oh my God, on the contraire, mon frere. Drop a W in the chat, everyone.
Well, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker.
I don't drive. I bike everywhere.
Provide an update on our fiscal position, on expenses, and on revenues in the fall economic update in due course this fall. But I do want to be very, very clear on Canada's fiscal position. I was at the IMF World Bank Finance Ministers meeting just last week, and that is where it was so clear that Canada has the lowest deficit, the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. Our position is enviable, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, it's nice to welcome back the Finance Minister. I was beginning to think that you forgot the address of this location. After 8 years, Canadians are worried it's not worth the cost. Canadians are struggling, and this government continues to increase its deficits and inflation. Everyone now agrees that deficits increase interest rates. So will the Finance Minister finally confirm for Canadians that she'll balance the budget so that interest rates can come down and Canadians can keep their homes?
I'd like to remind members that we are not to make an indirect or direct relationship to whether the presence of the members in this House or not.
Sit down, Speaker. The adults are talking.
That sometimes takes them out of this place. I'll have more to say on this later on this week. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Thank you for that important comment, Mr. Speaker, but I am happy to confirm that I was not in the House of Commons last week. In fact, none of us were,
because... I mean, they all had the week off. She's got a point. It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny.
The Deputy Prime Minister has 20 seconds left on her clock.
Last week was, of course, a constituency week. And I was proud to be able to do my job at the IMF World Bank Finance Ministers meeting, in particular because the G7 finance ministers affirmed our shared condemnation of Hamas and shared support for the State of Israel. The first time G7 ministers had met in person, Canada was at the table.
Again,
I just want to remind everyone to smash that like button if you haven't yet. And let's try to get over
remind members that
1,000 likes.
Time that members have to ask and to answer questions. The honourable member from Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, while households are dealing with higher interest rates, taxpayers are now on a bigger hook. That's because interest on the debt is going up. The government projected just a few months ago that it'll spend $44 billion on debt servicing costs this year, but that assumed that interest rates would go down. Instead, interest rates have gone up. So will the Minister of Finance finally tell Canadians how much they're now on the hook for higher debt servicing costs because interest rates haven't come down?
Then I have Vice Premier Ministre.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our government will state Canada's fiscal position, revenues, costs clearly in the fall economic statement in due course this fall. What the opposition clearly doesn't know or doesn't want to admit is that Canada's fiscal position is responsible, indeed is enviable, compared to our peer countries. This was reaffirmed by the independent ratings agency, DBRS Morningstar, which recently reaffirmed our AAA rating.
AAA credit rating.
S&P, which reaffirmed it after the budget.
Then I have Député de Charlebourg.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget Officer is expecting for the federal deficit to hit over $46 billion next year. That's 16% higher than the original Liberal government projections. Interest rates are unlikely to go down before April of next year. During a housing crisis, that's a disaster. Can the Minister of Finance confirm that we're going to be paying $6 billion more in interest next year?
Then I have
the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government will confirm budget numbers in the fall economic update. However, today, I want to highlight a very important reality, a reality that should be reassuring for all Canadians. Canada's fiscal outlook is very strong. Our deficit and GDP ratio is the lowest of all G7 countries, and our AAA credit rating was reconfirmed by credit rating agencies.
Le député de Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles.
Mr. Speaker, does the minister know that about 20% of mortgage loans are now at a negative rate, which means that they cannot pay more than interest? That's the inevitable result of increasing inflationary expenditures. No one listened, not the Bloc or the Liberals. After 8 years of distress management, will the Liberals rein in their expenses to help mortgage payments go down so that Canadians can keep their homes? The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member for the question, but it's confusing to me that he would pose such a question when he has a plan that's actually going to increase the cost of building homes and increase the cost of Canadians for living in them. His plan literally is to add taxes to home building in this country and to cut funding that's going to build more homes for Canadians. Mr. Speaker, over the course of our time in this House over the last number of years, we have repeatedly put measures on the floor that are going to help improve the affordability of housing in this country. Time and time again, that member has voted against them. Thank you so much.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, if Canada were part of the group formed by the United States to face the crisis between Israel and Gaza, Canada would be participating in decisions and have information firsthand. Is the government Or can the Deputy Prime Minister tell us as of today if humanitarian pathways will be opened into Gaza and opened for civilians towards Egypt? The Honourable Minister of International Development.
I just want to assure the Honourable Member that Canada was the first Western country to actually announce humanitarian assistance to civilians in Israel and Gaza. Not only that, by announcing it so early and so quickly, we've actually incentivized other partners to move forward. We're working with partners in the region and our trusted international organizations to ensure that we have access to civilians both in Gaza and Israel. We're working diligently, and as events move forward, we'll continue to insist on international humanitarian access to civilians in Gaza.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois firmly condemns the terrorist attacks by Hamas, and I reiterate that Israel has the right to defend itself. However, Hamas must be distinguished from all Gazans and the Palestinian people. Last Tuesday, the UN called for a humanitarian corridor to Gaza for medical reasons. This is the basis of Article 3 of the Geneva Declaration of the Protection of Civilians, saying that the wounded and sick shall be collected and cared for. What is Canada doing in real terms to ensure that Israel does just that?
The Honourable Minister for International Cooperation.
Speaker, we are continuing with our long-standing position that in conflict areas, humanitarian access must be provided to civilians to ensure that there is access to life-saving food, medicine, and water. I spoke yesterday with our trusted international partners as well as organizations on the ground, both international and Canadian. They have pre-positioned supplies. We are the first country that has moved forward to provide much-needed humanitarian assistance, and we're insisting on that access so that we can deliver to citizens and civilians who need that medical supplies.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Well, to send help, first we need a humanitarian corridor. We insist on it because Canada's been marginalized on the world stage. Once again, Canada sitting on the sidelines while the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and Italy are all working together. That is not acceptable, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to human rights, Canada has a role to play and must insist on playing it. Has the minister spoken directly with Israel about opening a humanitarian corridor into Gaza?
Wow.
Honourable Parliament.
Canada wants to go into Gaza.
We're deeply concerned about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. A civilian is a civilian, and any loss of civilian life is deeply troubled. We continue to call for international law to be respected. The minister has been engaging directly with her counterparts in the region about the need for a humanitarian corridor to provide rapid and unimpeded access for relief, and she will continue to do so. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna, Lake Country.
Speaker, after 8 years, the NDP Liberal government's wasteful inflationary spending, including whether they have no option other than to sell the family home. A Credit Canada representative told Bloomberg, quote, selling the house might end up being the only option for some homeowners. Wow. Last week, I heard of a nurse living in her car in the Okanagan. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. When will the Prime Minister finally stop his inflationary spending so Canadians can keep a roof over their head?
Mr. Speaker, I think it's fair to ask a question of the Conservatives when they talk about the inflationary spending. Are they talking about the programs that they're actually going to cut that are supporting people right now? Let's look at the measures that they're going to cut that they already voted against. Mr. Speaker, the question was about homelessness. When we put $1.3 billion on the table, they voted against it. Are they going to cut supports for the homeless? When we're talking about removing the GST so we can build more homes for middle-class families in this country, they intend to vote against it. Are they going to cut that too? Mr. Speaker, when we put money on the table for affordable housing, time and time they vote against it. Are they going to cut that too? They are reckless. They are not worth the risk. We are here to support the middle class.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Government that declared victory on inflation only to see it skyrocket.
That's right.
James from Langley, BC told Global News that he and his husband are selling his home as a result of their mortgage payments and returning to the rental market. Mortgage defaults are climbing, with forced sales events up 10%, as just reported by the Toronto Real Estate Board. After 8 years with this NDP Liberal government, people are being forced to sell their homes.
Yeah, especially with mortgage renewals coming up.
Prime Minister finally stop his inflationary spending so Canadians can keep a roof over their head.
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to share with my honourable colleague that I recently had a chance to sit down with the mayor of the Township of Langley to discuss their application of the Housing Accelerator Fund, which this member and her party is promising to get rid of. Yeah. We want to be there for the cities to help the very kind of people that she's asking about her in her question, that she promises to cut the support out from under should they form government. Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member is serious about building houses in this country, I would invite her to support Bill C-56, which is going to remove the tax on the construction of new homes, and I can't understand why they oppose it.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of Liberal government, we've seen compulsive deficits and unchecked inflationary spending. As a result, they've had a significant impact on increasing interest rates. According to Quebec's National Institute for Scientific Research, 1 in 5 Quebecers has difficulty repaying their debt and is likely to give up the keys to their home after 8 years of Liberal government. Will this government finally understand that managing things irresponsibly is expensive for Quebecers and all Canadians?
Then I have
the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, we've just heard partisan arguments, but let me give you some facts. Canada's position is responsible. We have a AAA credit rating, and that was reconfirmed by credit agencies. We have the lowest debt-to-GDP ratio in the G7. But if the Conservatives want to help us with the housing crisis, they need to support our legislation, C-56. That's the reality.
L'honorable député de Vancouver, Kingsway.
Millions of Canadians are going without their prescription medications because they can't afford them. Thousands die as a result. Universal public pharmacare will cover everyone and save us billions of dollars. Yep. This weekend, NDP members sent a clear message to deliver it. Now, the Liberals themselves promised public pharmacare 26 years ago, and their own convention delegates voted for it in 2016, 2018, and 2021. Will the Liberals keep their word and finally deliver the public pharmacare that Canadians need and want?
Yes. L'honorable ministre de la Santé.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I have enormous regard for my colleague. I know his commitment and passion to help reduce costs for Canadians is there. He would know, therefore, that the work that we've taken jointly with provinces and territories on bulk purchasing to see $3.5 billion in saving by working together to reduce costs for Canadians has happened. He knows that we've taken critical action on diseases, rare diseases and drugs for rare diseases. He knows that we've taken critical action on patented drugs. And yes, we are having a discussion on pharmacare legislation. I look forward to a continued productive conversation as we look at all of the health cares and priorities in keeping Canadians safe and healthy.
L'honorable député de Rosemont.
The honourable member for Rosemont-La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, it won't just save lives. Universal public drug coverage will save patients, workers, hospitals, and employers billions of dollars. It's time the Liberals took action. It's not just NDP activists who are saying it. All the studies and reports say the same thing. Even Liberal Party delegates voted for universal public pharmacare 3 conventions in a row. When will this government stop dragging its feet and deliver true universal pharmacare?
The
Honourable Minister of Health. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And one thing is clear, we need to bring down costs for drugs all across the country. And that's the action our government is taking. We are bringing down costs for almost $3.5 billion by buying medications together with the provinces and territories, by pooling our purchasing, and by working with our partners to find a way forward. And certainly we are working with all members here in the House to bring down the cost of medications.
Honorable député de Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the Leader of the Opposition continues to blame municipal mayors and councillors for our housing challenges, we've decided to work in collaboration with other levels of government, including our municipal partners. Our housing programs, including the Housing Accelerator Fund, incentivizes municipalities, nonprofits, and private sector to build more affordable homes, including purpose-built rentals. Can the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure please share with the House the importance of working in partnership with other levels of government and other housing stakeholders?
L'honorable ministre du Logement.
Mr. Speaker, let me take this opportunity to thank my honourable colleague for his advocacy as the chair of our Housing Caucus for policies that will help change the way that cities in this country build home. What's more, Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague made an announcement last week on behalf of the federal government that we will be announcing more than $93 million in his city that's going to lead over the next 3 years to the construction of more than 2,600 homes and nearly 9,000 over the next decade. Mr. Speaker, we are going to require that cities build homes closer to transit, closer to post-secondary institutions, and I look forward to continuing my cooperation with that member so we see more homes built in the city of Hamilton.
Isn't that where there's a bunch of pro-Hamas supporters right now?
Député de Peterborough, Kawartha.
Canadians, Conservatives, we all know after 8 years of this Prime Minister, he's just not worth the cost. But the Liberals and NDP still aren't receiving this message. Don't believe me? Take a look at the headlines. Average rent went up another 11% in past year, and even getting a roommate doesn't help much. Canada's rental crisis is getting worse, according to a new report that found that the average asking price for rent in September was $2,149, up by more than 11% more than a year ago. Enough. When will he stop his inflationary spending so Canadians can actually afford housing?
Good question. L'honorable ministre du Logement.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for her question, and I would point out that over the course of the past week, she attended the opening of a new affordable housing project that we funded in her own community, taking credit for a program that she in fact voted against. Mr. Speaker, the reality is when it comes to housing, we have a plan to change the math so it works for builders. We have a plan to change the way that cities build homes. We have a plan to continue to invest in affordable housing and to grow the productive capacity of the workforce. Mr. Speaker, the opposition's plan is to raise taxes on home building and to cut funding that's going to build those homes. We're going to continue to build more houses to make sure that everyone in this country can afford a roof over their head.
Like the 13 they've built in the past 8 years?
Inappropriate call. L'honorable député de Peterborough, Kawartha.
After 8 years of this Prime Minister, Canadians can't afford a house, and that's the reality. And we will continue to vote against inflationary spending that is driving up household debt. Canadians are paying more on the interest of their debt. They cannot afford a home. This is from Vicky, my single 30-plus daughter and 2 grandkids just moved in because she could no longer afford her $2,500 plus rent. She had to give up her job to move back into town with me. So I'm basically supporting all 3. So yeah, when will they learn how to manage money, decide about monetary policy, and actually build homes, not bureaucracy?
L'honorable député du Logement, l'honorable ministre du Logement.
Mr. Speaker, I assure you I am not making this up. She's talking about a lack of affordable housing in her community. We are literally discussing an affordable housing project funded by our government in Peterborough, and she voted against that particular policy. Mr. Speaker, she says she's going to continue to vote against these kinds of policies that are literally putting a roof over the head of some of her constituents, most vulnerable constituents in her community. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member has an opportunity to get more homes built in her community. She can support Bill C-56, remove the tax on new home construction, and invite some of her colleagues to do it with her.
L'honorable L'honorable député de Charles Wood, St. James, Assiniboia.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, $500 million in inflationary deficits have fueled 40-year inflation highs, causing the Bank of Canada to raise interest rates. In the midst of a housing crisis, mortgage defaults and forced home sales are on the rise. People are losing their homes. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister finally put an end to his inflationary spending so that Canadians can keep a roof over their head?
L'honorable vice-premier ministre et ministre des Finances.
Mr. Speaker, let me share some facts. Canada has the lowest debt to GDP ratio and
AAA credit rating.
G7. That is a fact. Canada has a AAA rating. That is also a fact. And you know what else is a fact, Mr. Speaker? The opposition, which claims to care about the housing challenges Canadians face, is blocking Bill C-56, which experts across the country say is essential to get more rental homes built. That is sheer, utter hypocrisy, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Montmagny-Lilley.
The honourable member for Montmagny-Lilley, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Mr. Speaker, this government's policies have forced the Bank of Canada to raise interest rates 10 times, and the impact is devastating. The latest example, 20% of mortgages with the big banks are now in negative amortization. This means the monthly payment doesn't cover the interest, so the amount owing keeps going up. It's a loan that never ends. When will the Liberals put an end to their inflationary deficits so that rates can come down and Canadians can stay in their homes?
L'honorable ministre.
The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. I'm looking forward to the day where the Conservative Party opposite will finally vote in favor of things that will do precisely what people need to help keep the roofs over their heads. And I hope, Mr. Speaker, that they will vote in favor of what the construction professionals and the Federation of Municipalities have said. They're delighted that we've cut the GST on the construction of new homes.
The
honourable member for Rivière-des-Mille. Mr. Speaker, based on an online consultation, the federal government has tossed out the Quebec winners of a competition to design a monument to the mission in Afghanistan. Well, the experts at Léger have studied that consultation, and they say the approach was not scientific. According to Léger, the results cannot be interpreted as the opinion of members of the armed forces. Any use of these data generalized to the public is faulty. Mr. Speaker, the basis for eliminating the Quebec bid was faulty. Will they give the contract to the Dow team? The Honourable Minister. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his question. Mr. Speaker, I think we all agree on the importance of our veterans, and that's why the department conducted a poll. Over 10,000 Canadians answered the poll, and most of them were veterans. And the concept that was selected was by Stimson, and people felt that better reflected the sacrifice and the bravery of our veterans. Mr. Speaker, we will always support our veterans, and that's why we chose the winning concept. The honourable member for Rivière-des-Mille. Mr. Speaker, this is from Léger, the leading experts on polls. They say the federal government's poll is not scientific and that the results are not reliable. Even Louise Arbour, former Supreme Court Justice, had to come out on Thursday to ask the federal government to play by their own rules. It's come to this, Mr. Speaker. There's a limit how far you can go to shut Quebec out. Will the government follow its own rules, listen to Justice Arbour, and award the contract to the Dow team? The Honourable Minister of...
It's turning into a bit of a snooze fest, eh?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, I'd like to thank my colleague for his question, and I look forward to working with him on the Veterans Affairs Committee. All members here recognize the importance of our veterans, and that's why we conducted the poll. And the vast majority of respondents were included veterans and their family members, and they felt that the design we chose best reflected the sacrifice and the bravery of our veterans. Mr. Speaker, I have a question for my honourable colleague. Does he want us to ignore the expressed wishes of our veterans? The honourable member for Foothills.
Years of inflationary spending and carbon taxes, food prices have skyrocketed, and many Canadians had empty tables at Thanksgiving. This is because of broken Liberal promises and a Liberal-made financial crisis. Canadian grocery CEOs did not commit to meet the Liberals' lower food prices by Thanksgiving. Now, as a result, many Canadians can't afford to feed their families, a quarter are skipping meals, and millions of Canadians had to rely on food banks for their Thanksgiving dinner. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister end his inflationary spending so Canadians can afford to feed their families?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, while the Conservative leader was having a self-aggrandizing, goodwill hunting delusion in an apple orchard, our government was focused on stabilizing food prices for middle-class Canadians. By calling on the 5 grocery chain CEOs to produce action plans that would make a difference for Canadians. Our government is now tracking and monitoring and holding the grocery chains accountable.
That was pretty funny.
Conservatives talk turkey, we'll talk results for Canadians.
I'll give it to him. That was pretty funny.
Colleagues, I saw that the member from Foothills had difficulty hearing the answer to the question that he had asked. I asked that we try to keep it down. And to all members, I ask that they please use comment which will not cause disturbance in the House. The honourable member from Foothills.
Broken Liberal promises and Liberals making light of the food crisis does not put food on the table. Many Canadians are starving because of the Liberals' broken promise to lower food prices by Thanksgiving. That is not what happened. Food prices are up 7% over last year. Now, the Prime Minister promised to lower food prices by Thanksgiving dinner. He failed. Another broken promise. So will the Prime Minister promise to lower his out-of-control spending so Canadians can afford a Christmas dinner, or will that be another promise broken?
I just want to remind everyone, if you haven't hit that like button, now would be the time. We're quite close to 1,000 likes. They keep cutting the audio feed.
Colleagues, we were doing so well on a day that was on a very sensitive issue internationally. I ask you to please continue with your good behavior for the day, and I ask in particular the member from Grand Prairie, please, to keep the comments to the time that he is asking questions. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And on this side of the House, we continue to do the hard work to ensure that Canadian families are supported. Just look to our investment to create a nationwide system of early learning and childcare, or look to our Canada Child Benefit. On this side of the House, we are making investments to make sure that families can buy the food, can get the school supplies, and wide system of early learning and childcare.
There's India again.
Canada Child Benefit. On this side of the House, we are making investments to make sure that families can buy the food, can get the school supplies and the sneakers that their kids need. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Dufferin Caledon.
Well, Mr. Speaker, they must have a very different definition of hard work than Conservatives have, because after 8 years of this Liberal government, we know that food prices are out of control.
That's right.
I went to the grocery store in Orangeville this past weekend for Thanksgiving. A loaf of Wonder Bread was $4.40. That's the definition of Liberal hard work. And how do we get there, Mr. Speaker? Massive inflationary deficits, a carbon tax that's driving up the cost of everything. Right. The fake photo ops of the Prime Minister isn't going to fix anything. Well, they cut the carbon tax, balance the budget so Canadians can pay for food.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, our government is fighting for Canadians on affordability every step of the way. We're fully seized with addressing the affordability challenges that Canadians are facing by calling in the top 5 grocery CEOs to work with us to stabilize food prices. Conservatives can call this a photo op. I think calling decisive action for Canadians on affordability a photo op says more about them than it does about us, Mr. Speaker. Regardless of the Conservatives' attacks, we'll stay focused on the pressing needs of Canadians.
Here, here.
L'honorable député de Pontiac.
The honourable member for Pontiac. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Small businesses and medium-sized businesses are at the heart of Quebec's economy. And that's why it's so important for the government to support them at crucial points in their economic development. I'd like to hear what the Minister of Tourism and Economic Development for the regions of Quebec, I'd like her to tell us what the Liberal government is doing to support small and medium-sized businesses and especially Indigenous entrepreneurs. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development for the regions of Quebec. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague is right. Our government has been supporting women-led and particularly Indigenous-led businesses. We announced funding of $100,000 for a company in Gatineau. It was founded by 2 brilliant women, Krisha and Melanie, and they celebrate the diversity and richness of Indigenous cultures. We celebrate their success, and we're there to support them. Happy Small Business Week.
L'honorable député
The honourable member for Edmonton Millwoods.
Prime Minister's gatekeeping, anti-pipeline, anti-resource development policies, hundreds of billions of dollars of project investments have fled Canada and taken countless powerful paychecks away from Canadian workers. These Liberals just aren't worth the cost. Conservatives warned the Liberals that their plans to steamroll provinces by giving themselves unprecedented powers over provincial infrastructure, industry, natural resources through their No More Pipelines bill, Bill C-69, was unconstitutional.
Hamas, India, Israel, China, Russia.
If the members want a briefing by the Justice Department on the difference, we would be happy to provide that to them, Mr. Speaker. Let me quote from the Supreme Court on what they said. This appeal is not whether Parliament can enact legislation to protect the environment. It is clear that Parliament can do so under the heads of power assigned to it under the Constitution Act of 1867. Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Exactly.
L'honorable député de Brantford-Brant.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this government's ongoing corruption, we have yet another scandal. Conflicts of interest, nepotism, abuse of power, and now we have allegations of criminality around the contracting practices in the top offices of this government. The $54 million price tag for the Arrive scam app is just the tip of the iceberg. Last week, the NDP Liberal Coalition voted to shut down the testimony of the Auditor General's review of this scandal. Why?
Brock is not messing around.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague knows very well that committees make their own decisions in terms of the work they want to do. What we have said, Mr. Speaker, is that at all times we expect people to comply with the contracting policies of the Government of Canada. And those that decide to do something that is worthy of a criminal investigation will obviously be investigated by the appropriate authorities. Absolutely. And we don't comment on investigations that the RCMP might decide to do on any of these issues.
The honourable member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of Liberal management, it's scandal upon scandal. We've just learned the RCMP has opened a criminal investigation into ArriveCan, which cost Canadians $54 million for nothing. It was a Montreal firm, Bottler, who sounded the alarm. For one contract, a senior Liberal government official strongly recommended that Bottler work with the same ArriveCan firm, GC Strategies, a two-person firm with no office and no computer expertise. Bottler identified what looks an awful lot like an organized system of collusion. After 8 years of turning a blind eye, will the Liberals tell us who's getting richer at our expense when it comes to awarding contracts?
Wayne?
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I've said repeatedly, we expect all those who work for the Government of Canada to follow the contracting rules, Treasury Board rules and other rules that apply. In the case of these allegations, Mr. Speaker, there could be some criminal activity, and we expect the appropriate authorities to investigate, and that's precisely what this government will allow them to do.
L'honorable député de Scarborough Centre.
Speaker, in communities across Canada and in my riding of Scarborough Centre, many Canadians are finding it difficult to find an affordable place to call home. Rather than scapegoating newcomers, we must work to ensure that they be a part of the solution to the housing crisis. Can the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship inform the House of our government's plan to tackle the labour shortage in the construction sector and build more homes for Canadians?
L'honorable ministre de l'Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, immigration is key to our economic growth, and now more than ever we need skilled trades in this country. That's why this summer we launched a global express entry system into this country to make sure that skilled labor workers could get in here in a faster pace. Simply put, more workers at a faster pace to get all those homes built. We need those workers. We need them from abroad. We need them here. They'll get the homes built.
Here, here. L'honorable député de Timmins Bay James.
The planet is on fire, and we just had Suncor CEO Rich Kruger tell us how he's going to maximize profits for big oil while the rest of us suffer a climate catastrophe. In a year of record profits, they fired 1,500 workers. In a year of unprecedented climate fire, their climate solution is to massively increase fossil fuel burning. Big oil is laughing at this government.
Hate to interrupt the member.
Chances are that buddy rode in a gas-powered vehicle, so kind of ridiculous.
When our leader asks questions. I hate to interrupt the member, but I'm having trouble hearing the member. Can the member please continue? 20 seconds left on the clock.
Thank you, sir.
Bunch of hypocrites.
It certainly hurts the Conservative Party as the planet burns, and they're supporting the massive increase in fossil fuel burning, which is why they backed Rich Kruger from CEO. The question is, what concrete steps will this government take to hold big oil to account to protect Alberta jobs, Canadian communities, and our planet from the fires that are happening from the climate crisis?
Here, here. L'honorable ministre du Changement climatique et de l'Environnement.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Honourable colleague for his question. In fact, our government have taken and are taking a number of measures to ensure that big oil companies do their fair share when it comes to fighting climate change. We're the first G7 countries to have eliminated fossil fuel subsidies 2 years ahead of schedule, something that the Conservative Party of Canada would never do. They want to make pollution-free, Mr. Speaker. We've also implemented measures to reduce methane emission by at least 40% by 2025 and 75% by 2030, which will make it one of the most ambitious measures in the world to reduce methane emission from the oil and gas sector. We have many more things coming, including a cap on the emissions of the oil and gas sector, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Richmond, Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, after the Governor General's lavish spending on international travel, we've learned her office spent over $117,000 on dry cleaning since 2018, an average of $1,800 per month. For fun, I did some calculations based on the going rate for these services. At the rates she's been spending, that's an average of 3 outfits a day, 365 days a year. Why doesn't the government cut her $33 million budget? What are they waiting for? Because she's clearly incapable of managing taxpayers' money seriously and responsibly.
That's insane.
The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Mr. Speaker, the Governor General has done important work for Canada. Obviously, we expect every dollar she spends to be done in a rigorous and conscientious way. Thank you.
Well, this brings to the end of question period. I understand there's going to be a number of points of order. I'd first like to recognize the honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In light of recent events, we've sought agreement from other parties, and I hope you will find unanimous consent for the following: that notwithstanding any standing order or usual practice of the House, Bill C-350, the Combating Torture and Terrorism Act, be deemed read a second time and referred to the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development.
That was a massive slap in the face by Independent there.
All those opposed to the honourable member propose the motion will say nay. Unfortunately, there is no unanimous consent.
Well, that's the end of question period, folks. That's where we're going to end it. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. This was an exciting stream. Of course, I was wrong, it seems, with my title. I titled these before they actually go live. So a lot of it is based off of research that I'm doing, seeing who's where, and seeing, what's just happening across Canada. I am very much under the impression that if these pro-Hamas protests continue across Canada, that they will have to invoke some sort of Emergencies Act. I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree with that? And I want to thank you for watching. I also want to encourage you to give a like and just check to see if you're subscribed. Over 50% of the viewers are not subscribed. So why not subscribe? If you're going to watch anyways, it's free to do. It helps fight climate change. That's where we're going to end it. If you want a sticker, I love Canadian oil and gas, or you can see underneath, I did not see that coming. The link for that is down in the description. Thank you everybody for tuning in for the entire live stream, or however long that you did. And I will see you guys same time tomorrow. All right. Take care, everyone.